The 2018 Colts draft class was one of the best we've ever seen. You get 3 highly impactful players, the first 3 picks, and really every single pick except for 1 or 2, you got guys that were on your team for quite a few years. Many of them are still on the team and making a big impact now, whether they're a special teams player, or they were a special teams player, and now they're really a starter. The 18 class is what really put Chris Ballard, this Colts team, back on the map. And it really confirmed that Chris Ballard was here and that he was a good general manager and he knew what he was doing. Quenton Nelson has been an all-pro 4 of the 5 years he's been in the NFL. Shaquille Leonard has been an incredible linebacker. Highly impactful. Sacks, interceptions, forced fumbles. Braden Smith, a top 10 right tackle, a very good right tackle for the Colts. He's been very good. You could argue top 5. And the rest of these guys like Nyhein, Hines, Jordan Wilkins, Zaire Franklin, still on the team. Zaire Franklin is. Jordan Wilkins actually kind of made a return last year, so pretty cool about that. But in general, this draft class is incredible. From special teams play to just impactful players, this draft class is so important to the future of this team. Without this draft class, Quenton Nelson, Shaquille Leonard, Braden Smith, some of these other players, what are the Colts? If you didn't have Quenton Nelson, Shaq, or any of these players back in 17, the year after Angelo retired, and you had Jacoby, say you missed on 2 out of 3 of those picks, the team probably would have had 4 or 5 wins, if that. The Jacoby year after Angelo retired, and then it ultimately drove the Colts to be a damn good football team with Philip Rivers. It drove them to be a good football team with Carson Wentz. This year, the quarterback carousel really caught up with us, but we're going back and we're regrading the 2018 Colts draft class. First pick 6, the Indianapolis Colts select Quenton Nelson. This is an A+ right off the bat. I mean, he's one of the best guards in the National Football League. He's one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL. He has allowed very little sacks. He's allowed, a bit of pressures, but it's, you're going to allow pressures, but he's been so dominant as a guard in the run and pass game. It's like, any player that you pick in the first round, you hope that they could be at least a great player. Quenton Nelson, generational, one of the best, the elite of the elite. This is an A+. You hit home, and especially, protecting Andrew Luck that year and then protecting a concrete shoes Philip Rivers. And then Carson Wentz can move a little bit. And then, yeah, he had a little bit of a down year last year, but all in all, last year was a down year for everyone in the Colts. Everyone had a rough year. It's either they're injured or just didn't perform, but this is almost as good as you could ask for unless it's Patrick Mahomes you're drafting in the first round. Maybe an edge rusher. There are a few other positions that, maybe are better value, but nonetheless, you hit home on a pick on probably a future Hall of Fame guard. And I'm redeeming him as Hall of Fame. A lot of people are. He's an incredible guard, incredible player in the locker room. He pushes players. He's got that nastiness. He just brought that to the offensive line. You always need that offensive lineman, that one guy that's just nasty and is relentless. Nelson is that. You need that type of energy on that offensive line, and Quenton Nelson brought it. He basically changed the O-line. Not really on his own, but he really brought the energy that you need, that power, that, nasty energy. Second pick, Shaquille Leonard. He's been one of the best linebackers in the National Football League since he's arrived. First year, he led the league in tackles. He had, 7 sacks, a few interceptions, a few forced fumbles, and he's been great since. In the Carson Wentz year, he was, he had half the turnovers we had, and we had the second most turnovers behind the Cowboys. And Darius Leonard had half of them. He was involved in 16 turnovers. Yeah, insane. He got a few sacks. He's not just great on the field; he's great off the field. He's an incredible player, and it's funny because when the Colts drafted him in 2018, a lot of people said, this was the F of the draft. This was the, why did you draft him this early? He's not going to go this early. He's not going to be good. That was deemed as the worst pick in the draft by Bleacher Report. And look how it turned out. Shaquille Leonard, one of the best linebackers now. Yeah, he's had some injury issues. And, more recently, more serious, and and that's really the back injury. It's serious. What, 2 back surgeries and within a year? That's scary. And you just paid him $20 million, but he's a great player. And if he comes back and he's anything what he was prior to these back surgeries, I mean, man, you don't got much to worry about. You're set up linebacker, and that's kind of why you didn't re-sign Bobby Okereke, because you had other guys that you drafted. The next year, you drafted AJ Speed. He turned out to be good. Zaire Franklin, you drafted in this draft. So many great players from this draft that are still in the team. Shaq is one of them. Shaq is an A+. Braden Smith, right tackle, one of the better right tackles in the league the last few years. Last year was a little bit of a down year, but he still had a pretty good year. He allowed a bit of sacks. I think it was 7, but the entire offensive line really struggled. At the end of the day, he was one of them that held his own. He found a way to hold his own. Yeah, ever since being paid, he's had some injury issues, but at the end of the day, he's been a great player. He was drafted in the 2nd round. He was, when he was coming out, he was expected to be a guard, and you converted him to right tackle, which is even more valuable. Tackles are more valuable than guards, and you move him to right tackle. Voila, beautiful. And then you have Mark Linsky on the inside that year. That was an incredible year. The first year, best offensive line in the league. Hasn't really reached that pinnacle again, but he's still been a very good right tackle every year. I just meant the entire offensive line as a whole, but Braden Smith has been very good. It's an A+ pick. You pick these. If you ask any team, do you want these top 3 players in your 3 picks, that you're going to get Quenton Nelson, Shaquille Leonard, and Braden Smith? Any team would take all 3 of those. Unless you're throwing Patrick Mahomes in there and then maybe you don't get any of the other 2 or 3. But it's just how it works, a quarterback. But that's an A+, honestly. Incredible. He was a Rookie of the Year in 2018. As Quenton Nelson and Shaquille Leonard both were as well. So then you have Kemoko Turay. So Kemoko Turay is kind of the more, come on, man. If he was healthy, he could have been a very good edge rusher too. Just couldn't stay healthy. And it sucked because he had a nasty spin move, a lot of upside. So, he was I think he was out of Rutgers. There's a lot to like about him coming out. He was very, he's athletic. He was producing. It just sucks that injuries sucked him up, and the injuries didn't allow him to have the career that he maybe could have had, because when he was healthy, he had, the 2 seasons he was healthy and he had a decent amount of snaps, he had 5 and 6 sacks. Now, it's not nothing to write home about, but it's something, right? It's those are nice numbers for an edge rusher too, really. And, he just couldn't stay healthy. The Colts didn't re-sign him off the deal. He went to the 49ers, and he became a pretty good... No, he actually wasn't a good player for the 49ers. He barely played. I don't know why I said he became pretty good, because he really wasn't. Didn't get any time. And, you honestly wonder during those years, even when he was a little healthy, you're wondering why, why isn't he playing more? Why isn't he in the game more? Because when he played, he was highly effective. And yeah, he did tear the Achilles. I think it was his 2nd year. And he was having a breakout year. It was versus the Chiefs. We upset Mahomes with Jacoby Brissett. If you guys remember that, props to you. Amazing. Just didn't work out after that injury, that Achilles injury, and it sucks, but it is what it is. I'm going to give him that one a D. A D+. Yeah, he had 2 okay years with us. But he was hurt a lot of times, and, more often than not, he didn't make that much of an impact. And being a 2nd round pick, you expect him to be on the team for a little while, make an impact, either be, a solid player, a solid rotational piece, maybe a really good backup. Just a player that sticks around and is all right for your team. He couldn't do that. Then you had Tyquan Lewis. This is another one. His early career, his 4-year career in Indianapolis, actually 5 now, it was really injury-riddled, and it sucked because when he was on the field, he was impressive. He set the tone in that Dallas Cowboys game when we won, what was it, 23-24 nothing. He blocked a field goal, and that kind of just set the tone for the game. And then there's a few years later where he was he's enjoying another really nice year, because I think he got hurt that Cowboys game, or the game after, sometime in that year, late in that year. But when he came back, he finally was getting the chance to play again, and I think he tore his Achilles. I don't know if he tore his Achilles the first time or what, but he did. he had a serious injury like an Achilles tear or an ACL tear, and he just hasn't been back, and it sucks because every time he seems to gain some momentum, he has a serious injury. Something happens, and when you're given a grade and you're talking about moves in the draft or free agency, you can't really give the benefit of the doubt 90% of the time. And this is one of those cases. He's made some nice plays here and there, and he has shown that he was a good player when healthy. And he's still with the Colts. The Colts re-signed him to another deal. But he's getting a C for me. And if this year he finds a way to get some more playing time, which is going to be tough too, this defensive line is very deep, I'll maybe raise that grade to C plus or B if he really proves to be a really good player. He was moved to the inside a few times, played on the outside a few times, and he was pretty effective on both. Just sucks to see him not be able to stay healthy. Next player we have here is a guy that you guys are all going to know as well, Nyhein Hines. Yeah, he's not on the team anymore, but for being a 4th round pick and being such a dynamic, he's a very good scat back for the Colts. He was. He was good. He was good at receiving the ball of the field. Was a good pass catcher. He was an all right runner. That wasn't his cup of tea, but he was a good runner. He's that type of player. You just want to get him the ball, and yeah, he's going to make a play. He's a dynamic playmaker. He's a home run waiting to happen. Around 18 touchdowns in his career so far. Yeah, he was traded to Buffalo for a fifth, I believe it was. And yeah, it stings to see such a great player go. He's kind of like a fan favorite. He's great in the locker room. He's electric on the field, punt returner, kick returner, and he went to Buffalo. And he was pretty good in Buffalo. He is a pretty good kick returner. I think he returned 2 kicks after that DeMar Hamlin situation and everything. It's like, yeah, he makes an impact wherever he goes. He's a great talent, great work ethic, a great person. And he was very good for the Colts. He was good for the Colts for those 3-4 years he was with us, and ultimately it was just a matter of fact of, we have other guys in the room, and that, he didn't really want to be with the Colts at that point anymore because of where the team was heading. He's tired of the new player, of the new quarterback every year. He wasn't buying into Frank anymore. He was tired of it. He wanted to go to a team where he could maybe win, and he did that, and I'm happy for him. But for the Colts, this is still a B plus pick for me because you picked him in the 4th round, and he was a pretty big impact player for you for a couple of years. Now, when you pick a player in the 4th round, sometimes they don't even make the roster. Majority of the time, they do. 4th round picks usually make the roster. They're they're nice depth piece or nice little playmaker there, and Nyhein Hines was that and a little more. So I think B plus is a fair grade for Nyhein Hines all the way. Next pick we have here is Darius Leonard. So Darius Leonard, his rookie year, didn't really see much playing time. He had a nice training camp, and then he suffered a torn ACL. I think it was the fall. I think it was the following year after he was drafted. He was enjoying a really nice training camp. Issue was toward the ACL, and he could never really come back from that. Sometimes when you're drafted in the 5th round, you're drafted in the late rounds, and you tear your ACL, you have a serious injury. You fall back, and it's really an uphill battle, and Darius Leonard really lost that battle in the Colts room. But, eventually the Colts cut him, and he went to the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm not sure if he's still there, but he ultimately never turned out. I think he caught a touchdown maybe with us. Maybe he caught one. He caught a few passes when the team was really thin on receivers. But how about that year when, Dontrell Inman, the Colts signed Dontrell Inman in the middle of the year. Chester Rogers was hurt, I think, at one point. The wide receiver room was really thin. That was when you had Andrew Luck. And, he still didn't step up to a role to where maybe the Colts are going, yeah, let's give him a shot. No, they still didn't think he was ready yet, and he never performed. He never came out and he did it. Yeah, he's a 5th round pick. He never really made an impact. It's still an F. You have to grade it fairly no matter where it is. Yeah, maybe if you have a 7th round pick and he turns out to be a good special teams or, a special teamer and he just turns out to be a good player in general, maybe it's an A just because of the positional value, and it's just a bonus if they're an incredible player, it's going to get an A plus like a superstar player. But if they're a good player coming out, and they they come out of the 7th round and they make an impact. I'm talking about Zaire Franklin, if you couldn't tell. They get an A, but if they're above and beyond the 7th, they get an A+. But the 5th round, that's kind of off topic a little bit, but in the 5th round, you kind of expect him to be a nice depth piece, maybe a practice squad guy. And, he was a practice squad guy for a little bit, never transpired into anything else. Me giving it an F. He barely played. You didn't get much out of him. So that's the truth. Jordan Wilkins, this was a nice little pickup. He was a nice change of pace back. He came in once in a while, made a nice difference. He was a nice role player for the Colts, and he went to the Jaguars. He went to a few different football teams, and then he actually came back to the Colts last year and played a game a little while. I think he played versus the Jaguars last year. He was a good player for us. That year when we had a few injuries, I think it might have been the Jacoby Brissett year. I think Marlon Mack got hurt for a few games. Something happened to him. I think Nyhein Hines was actually hurt. You had him and Jonathan Williams or Jamal. I think it was Jonathan Williams came out of nowhere and had 2 100-yard rushing games in a row. And Jordan Wilkins was one of those other running backs that had that enjoyed a pretty nice time when those two were out. He found a way to make plays. Was he as efficient as maybe a Mack or Nyhein Hines in their respective roles? No. But he was still a very good depth piece. He, once in a while when he got a carry, it seemed like he popped off a 20, 30-yard run. And that's sometimes all you can ask for when you have a 5th-round pick. Now, I'm giving this pick a B because he was a good player for the Colts for a couple of years. And, he was never that starter. He was never that guy. But picking a guy in the 5th, you don't really expect that. You expect him to come in and be an all-right player. And that he was. He was a very good player that year. Actually, he was pretty good for the Colts in general for a while. It's impressive value. It's impressive for where he was drafted. He had a few impact games. He didn't get a second contract because the room was stacked. At that time, you were bringing Jonathan Taylor in from the draft. You had Marlon Mack both in the same room. You had Nyhein Hines. You had a lot of big-time playmakers. You just didn't have room for Wilkins. And, considering when you have a loaded room like that, so you tend to let good players go. It's just how football works sometimes, and it's just how it works. Sometimes it's just what happens. But this was a good pick. This was a very good pick in the 5th round. Then you had Nyhein Cain. Nyhein Cain was kind of sought after as a really good value pick, in that it was kind of a steal. He was a good receiver for Clemson. He made some big time plays here and there. In general, he was just a productive receiver for Clemson. He came into the Colts, and he had a pretty darn nice training camp. But what happened? Kind of similar situation to Darius Leonard. He tore the ACL, and he just never really got the chance to come back and make an impact. But to fight back against that, as I said for Darius Leonard, 2 years in a row when you had Jacoby, Andrew Luck, and then also Phillip Rivers. I think Kane was still with us with Phil, in the Phillip Rivers years as Fountain was. It seemed even when the receiver room got thin because of the injuries and you really needed some emergency guys, it seemed like guys like Marcus Johnson more so stepped up when, Nyhein Cain was still there. He just, he had the opportunity to make a difference, and he didn't. So, it's hard to give Nyhein Cain a bad grade, but he didn't make much of an impact on the field in the games. And it gets an F for me. At the time, it was probably a B plus an A pick, before anything. But that's why you wait. That's why you can't really grade a draft until 4 or 5 years into it. 3, 4, 5 years into the career, because year 1 doesn't tell the whole story. Year 2 sometimes doesn't. And, year 3 and 4 sometimes don't always tell the whole story either. Sometimes players need quite a few years or, just bad luck. And Nyhein Cain just didn't have good luck. He's getting an F. He really didn't. He didn't make an impact on the field. And it sucks because he had a lot of high hopes. So, he had a lot of high praises. And then his next 2 picks were 7th-round picks. Matthew Adams, linebacker at Houston. He was an incredible value here at 7. He was a very good special teams player. He stepped in at linebacker when you really needed to, and he was an all right player at the linebacker position. And he was a special teams ace for a while. when you saw the linebacker, it gets a pretty good grade because he was, in the 7th round. Like I said, you draft guys to be good special teams players. I apologize. ESPN notification. Let's see what it is. NFL fair catch rule tweaked. Fair catches on kickoffs will now result in a team starting at the 25-yard line regardless of where it's fielded. Wow, okay, that's interesting. Little shake up, in the middle of the video of, I'll get to make a video on that maybe, but where were we at? Matthew Adams, a solid linebacker for the Colts, a very good special teamers he was. He didn't get a second contract because the Colts had a lot of depth at linebacker, and they drafted a guy in Jordan Glasgow next year who was ultimately another special teams guy, so there really wasn't much need to keep him when you had, other depth options and need their speed. You had Anthony Walker still at the time when you gave rid of him, I think. So you got to understand that, even though he's a good player, special teamers, sometimes good players don't stay on their team. They just don't. It just doesn't happen. They go to another team and they'll be a good player, yeah. But it's still an A- for me because he was just a good player for the Colts. Being a 7th round pick, it was phenomenal value for what he became, and I'm not going to complain. Very good pick. Zaire Franklin. This dude's still on the team. Syracuse man. I'm really happy of how this 7th round pick turned out. You have to be. Being a 7th round pick, you're not even, towards the very end of the draft, I think it was like pick 235. Don't ask me how I remember that, but Zaire Franklin, he was another special teams ace for a little while until he really carved into that backup role, and then he became a starter. Darius Leonard and Bobby Okereke and Zaire Franklin last year were really the top 3 guys. Bobby Okereke gone now. Zaire Franklin's still on the team, and we have EJ Speed. Zaire Franklin is gonna have a big impact. Last year he had a lot of tackles. I think he had over 100 tackles. He's a big-time tackler, a tackling machine. So he's a solid linebacker, tackle machine. Incredible value for where you drafted him towards the end of the draft. It's just another incredible pick by Chris Ballard in the 2018 draft class. And ultimately, this draft class gets an A+. There were 2 players in the 5th and 6th round, 2 receivers. It just didn't turn out. Every other player made a pretty good impact for you. And that gets an A+. When you go through a draft with how many picks you had. You had, let's see, let's count them. You had, I don't know why that is there. Quenton Nelson. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. When you have 9 out of those 11 players play pretty big roles in your football team for quite a few years, it's impressive. Some 7th, 4th, 5th, 6th rounders sometimes don't even make the roster. So I want you guys to let me know what you think about this draft class. It's a pretty damn good draft class by Chris Ballard. Do you think it's the best the Colts have ever had? I think it's one of the best there has ever been. There's been some very good draft classes like the Seahawks in a couple of years ago. A lot of good draft classes, but I think this is one of them. I think you could put this up there just because of how many players that you got that just made an impact overall. So I want you guys to let me know what you think. Thank you for tuning into the JDW Sports Talk Show. Where fans, welcome. Next video, I will be doing the 2017 class, Malik Hooker, Quincy Wilson, really going back a little bit there. So make sure you stay tuned. Put that post notification bell on so you don't miss that video. This is JDW Sports Talk Show, signing off.